Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Song to Song. This is the last film in Terrence Malick's Loose trilogy, starting with To the Wonder, then Knight of Cups, and then Song to Song. It was actually shot basically at the same time as Knight of Cups, to my understanding. It was shot about 5 to 6 years ago, I believe in about 2012, and took over 3 years to edit in post-production, which most of Terrence Malick's films are actually made in post-production. It's kind of the least celebrated 3 films that Terrence Malick has ever made. I'd say it's probably a trilogy that no one's ever really liked that much. To the Wonder probably got the most discussion, Knight of Cups a little bit, and I feel like barely anyone's talking about Song to Song at this point, because people have kind of had it with this style, and it's kind of known as kind of the B-sides collection period of Terrence Malick's filmography. It used to be it would take forever for a new Terrence Malick film to come out, and you never knew when one was going to come out, since we've got one in 2013, one in 2016, and now one in 2017. Apparently this is the shortest amount of time between 2 Terrence Malick films, and it doesn't seem to have worked out for him. Also, because these films are very meandering, very experimental, it looks like they're just kind of winging it, shooting tons of beautiful footage with Emmanuel Lubezki as the cinematographer, and kind of editing it together to kind of find kind of a semi-plot. It's always like a loose plot, this one about a love triangle kind of a thing going on in the Austin music scene. That's sort of kind of it. Michael Fassbender's a music producer, Ryan Gosling and Rudy Mara are up-and-coming musicians, and Ryan Gosling's kind of a songwriter, although despite this being about the Austin music scene and the music industry, no one plays any songs, but you're to understand that they really like music or something. And Natalie Portman's kind of in it as maybe someone who wants to be a singer, sort of. Like most of these Terrence Malick films, you kind of sort of get the idea of a plot, you get the emotion of what sort of these people are going through, but maybe I'm giving him too much credit. I kind of feel like when I watch them, I feel like I totally get them. Another part of me feels like, well, if I were to watch it a bunch of times, I'm sure I could really deep dive into it, and it's kind of like one of those film student kind of a movies that you could watch over and over again and unlock more and more secrets. But the problem with this kind of period of Terrence Malick's films is they're so groaning and long, and by the end your patience has dwindled that you don't actually really want to do that, which doesn't work out for him, particularly someone with an interesting auteurish style. And I think that's the other thing about these films is at the beginning, you know, if you're an auteurish critic, you'd give To the Wonder, you just put it on your top 10 list because, hey, it's a new Terrence Malick. And frankly, yes, no one makes movies like Terrence Malick, so I sort of understand going into that kind of he's a great auteur, so all his movies are great things. And I don't know necessarily if all his movies are great, or at this point with these 3 even good and stuff, but they're definitely unique. They're uniquely made. Even people when I saw Lion, where they tried to do Terrence Malick style, or anybody else has tried to do a Terrence Malick style, whether it's a TV ad or an indie film or something like that, they never successfully pull it off. It always feels like less than. Probably because Terrence Malick has one of the greatest DPs doing some of his greatest work. You know, when Emmanuel Lubezki works with someone like, let's say, Inarritu, it always feels like he's kind of the more commercial version or the less than version than when he works with Malick. He kind of does his real refined, amazing, experimental, beautiful cinematography for Malick, and that's where he really refines his craft and becomes an even greater DP, in my opinion. Oftentimes it felt like, particularly when he's shooting near balconies and stuff, it felt like the camera would just fall off the ledge, and like the character kind of sort of might do. Although that's kind of maybe a metaphor for the whole movie. In this, it feels that way again. It feels like this loose, unhinged quality that I don't think most cameramen can really add that kind of dimension to a film that Emmanuel Lubezki can. Now, they're not really saying much with that dimension. It's almost like a film exercise more than a movie, and seeing how you can use little parts and whispering, monologue-y poetry voices to kind of assemble a movie together. And that's kind of, you know, I guess what sort of Terrence Malick is good at, but this isn't Tree of Life anymore. It feels like we're getting into the less than Tree of Life quality. I love Tree of Life. That movie is a very emotional movie for me, and there's certain segments in this that are very emotional, even segments that I found emotional that I knew didn't work, particularly with Ryan Gosling and I assume his father when he's in this bed and he looks very old and sickly and things. That was very emotional. Did that have anything to do with the movie at all? No. But saying that Terrence Malick doesn't exactly adhere to structure or story structure and kind of critiquing him for that, I don't think necessarily works, because this film clearly isn't doing that. I sort of love that he exists and gets to do these kind of exercises. I would have probably liked had he done them in like the 80s when he was just teaching at film school and not doing anything. Then like now I feel like he's kind of lessened his brand, frankly, as you know, you'd say in the digital space or whatever. But he definitely has, because this guy who is so renowned, and you think of Days of Heaven and Badlands and Tree of Life and The Thin Red Line and The New World, and now you think of these three that nobody likes. Although I will say, I think what this film has going for it is, unlike To the Wonder and Knight of Cups, who had various famous actors in them strewn about them, and it didn't feel like there was any reason he had them other than the fact that he could use famous movie stars to be in his weird experimental art movie that probably cost way too much. In this one, he actually populates it with enough cool cameos from bands and stuff, as he shot a lot of stuff at the South by Southwest Music Festival. I'm not exactly sure which one, but I'm assuming in like 2012 or around there. And he gets them to work very well, although he has an interesting cast with Ryan Gosling and Michael Fassbender and Rooney Mara. And I will say that I think Michael Fassbender does this kind of cool Mephisto kind of performance, and it looks like he had to kind of act off of nothing. It probably shows more of Michael Fassbender's charisma and range than any, you know, film where he actually, you know, has a script to act off of. It probably shows how good of an actor he is, as well as Ryan Gosling and Rooney Mara, who have real chemistry and presence about it. Not to keep bringing up a movie that I'm sure no one's comparing this to, but if you look at something like Lion, where she's just, you know, sort of the girlfriend in that, I think she has better presence and a better performance in this. Ryan Gosling as well, I think he actually brings some humor to it and lightness to a Terrence Malick film, which actually helps this movie quite a lot. And Natalie Portman brings a kind of performance I don't normally see from her, and she's blonde for whatever reason, but I quite liked her in this. But I thought it was kind of an interesting change of pace for her. I've noticed like a lot of actors, when they go through the Terrence Malick machine, usually come out like a stronger actor in a lot of ways, because you kind of have to like find your way through this somehow and get a good performance despite the director and no one else sort of helping you. I assume. I haven't been on set. And Cate Blanchett, I actually thought, I saw shots of her at the beginning and I go, oh, did he just use footage of Knight of Cups in this? I guess he did. And then towards the end I was like, oh, she's in this actually. Okay. As a person. But one thing that works for this is kind of all the appearances from various bands. Particularly Patti Smith basically steals the movie for me. She's basically just talking about her life, and it's kind of like Rooney Mara interviewed her and they cut out her giving the questions like it's a press tour thing. But actually that part really works. I think he did a really good job using Patti Smith. If there's any glue that's holding this thing together, which it really doesn't feel like there is, I think Patti Smith going throughout it really worked. Iggy Pop was great in it. Johnny Lydon or Johnny Rotten, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Spank Rock. I see names on the Wikipedia that I'm like, I don't remember. My wife said Lakey Lee was in it. I don't really know what Lakey Lee looks like, so I can't really say. But everyone says she was in it, so I believe it. But like people like Florence Welch and the Black Lips, and you know, I know the Stooges kind of played in it. Tegan and Sarah, I'm not even sure were in it. It's kind of confusing who was and wasn't in it, because Terrence Malick has the reputation for shooting things with famous people and then like not using it at all. I will say in certain cases, like the Iggy Pop stuff, the John Lydon stuff, and particularly the Patti Smith stuff, it added kind of a little more fun to it and made it a little more watchable. I actually kind of like this one a lot more than Knight of Cups, and maybe a little more than To the Wonder, although it's been a little bit since I've seen To the Wonder, so who knows. Although the relationship's gone way too long and missed the point of what the original plot sort of was trying to do, so you're like, why are we still following these people? At a certain point, you're like, so we're moving on to like Ryan Gosling dating like Cate Blanchett and Bernice Malho, who I don't really know that well, and she's in this. Val Kilmer gives an interesting cameo with a chainsaw, which was weird. And Holly Hunter's in this and probably isn't going to get enough credit, but I thought did a pretty good performance in the limited part she's in as Natalie Portman's mother. And giving kind of the backstory of these people's families, I don't know if that really connected. I don't know if this movie honestly works. There's a lot of creepy, weird male gaze stuff, which both this and Knight of Cups are definitely guilty of. It kind of sometimes, there's certain parts in it where it feels like, you know, someone going through a breakup, talking about the universe and how life is unfair and human relationships are by default flawed and things like that. And at certain points you're like, that might be true, and at other points you're like, whoa dude, maybe chill out at your coffee bar and close your crazy Breitbart article that you're super into, because like, come on, for real. It doesn't really work as well as I think like Tree of Life. It really resonated with me, and I still honestly haven't thought about going back to that because it felt like a really overwhelming experience and a beautiful experience. The rest of these, it feels like a little overwrought and overdone, and maybe it's because I've grown since those times. Maybe we've all grown since those times, or maybe we all realized Terrence Malick was a lot worse. I don't think that's true, and that seems to be what a lot of people are jumping towards. Just because this is kind of outdated doesn't make it a bad movie. That doesn't necessarily. But I think this is probably the strongest of those three films. If you were like, what of these B-side movies should I see, and you hadn't seen the other two, I would probably recommend this one because I think it works, I guess, a little better. Although part of me is now thinking maybe To the Wonder worked better. But it's definitely better than Knight of Cups. So if you're going to see two, I guess. And particularly if you're into music, there's some music in it, like throughout it, basically. But it's not like a music movie. It's about the music industry, but it's sort of just about the relationships and them hanging out. It looked like Michael Fassbender and Ryan Gosling had a great time together. I'd love to see them be in a movie together again because I thought they actually had pretty good chemistry. And Rooney Mara, when she does her more art housey stuff, she picks more interesting roles, frankly, than when she does, like, you know, her bigger stuff, which usually doesn't work out as well. And I think she works a lot better in that. She has kind of a kooky presence about her, and I think that worked a lot better in Song to Song. I don't think this is a movie for anyone. If you're like want to get into Terrence Malick, this is like not the movie for you. You need to watch a bunch of other stuff, which are a lot better, and you should see like Badlands, Days of Heaven, Thin Red Line, New World, and Tree of Life, and then maybe come to this. This is not what you need to be going to at the beginning of Terrence Malick, and I think Terrence Malick is probably one of the great, interesting auteurs of the 70s because there's no one else like Terrence Malick. When you think of an auteur, you think of someone who's distinctly different, but the whole idea of what Terrence Malick does is interesting, and I think he does actually help the medium of film doing these kind of big, broad, crazy movies with movie stars. It's just, are those interesting to sit through and watch? And I think cinephiles will stick around for Terrence Malick, but I think he's kind of reached the breaking point. He didn't go so far. It's not like each of these films got worse and worse. I feel like Knight of Cups was almost a breaking point for me, but I'll still, because of my love of Days of Heaven, because of my love of Badlands and Tree of Life and all those things, I will keep going back. But it's kind of like I'm just filling off a checklist and being loyal to an auteur, and being an auteur's kind of little cinephile bitch, and not really penalizing him as maybe I should, and just go like, you know, you kind of suck now. I do think he's gotten worse, and I know he's recently said he's going to do more of a structured story, and I think that's probably an avenue Terrence Malick should go into. But I like that a filmmaker will do kind of a weird exercise kind of a film like this. I guess I kind of respect it more than like it. I will probably never see any of this weird trilogy ever again, and I honestly don't even sort of want to. Maybe To the Wonder. Now I'm a little curious about To the Wonder. Reviewing this, not seeing it, made me want to rewatch To the Wonder. I don't know. I think Terrence Malick is still one of the great filmmakers of our times and stuff, but these three films don't necessarily reflect that. It's an interesting, weird film, odd art movie experiment at a time when most art theaters are not playing like art movies as much. They're playing small, mini major kind of things. No one's going full art movie like this, and I guess I respect it for that. I respect this movie, and I will always probably respect Terrence Malick to a certain degree, but this movie was kind of watching an auteurist director kind of wank off, and because he has one of the great DPs like Emmanuel Lubezki doing some of his greatest work with him, and this is, I believe, their 5th film together, it kind of works a lot better than it has any right to. Most directors who try to do things like this, it never works out like this, and Terrence Malick is very lucky that it works out as good as it does. And if you're like, hey, it wasn't that good, that because he had Emmanuel Lubezki, but because he had as good of co-stars and good cameos as he did, this film got enormously lucky and trying to help its kind of subpar quality. Exercises are a cool way to kind of flex your creative muscle, but they're honestly not as fun to watch in the end. So if you've seen Song to Song and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Put up those things. Cool, right?